Welcome back. We are reading Plato's Republic on the beach. So yesterday we finished up Book 1 of the Republic. I actually said there were 12 books in the Republic. I was wrong about that. There were only 10 books. So this book just got shorter, I guess. What did we talk about? So in the last video, we talked about the second half of Book 1, which featured Thrasymachus. And so remember the first half, Socrates talked to Cephalus a little bit about old age and what it's like to have a lot of money. And then Cephalus' son, Polemarchus, jumps in the conversation. They start talking about justice. Polemarchus says that justice is helping your friends and harming your enemies. And Socrates persuades him that that can never be true because harming somebody cannot be just. And then in the second half, we had Thrasymachus come in with his own definition, and he was spoiling for a fight like a wild beast and kind of sprung into action. And he offered his own definition, which is that justice is whatever is advantageous to the stronger, which is maybe the most cynical definition of justice there could possibly be. But he defends it pretty well. And he draws a distinction between justice and injustice for the individual. So somebody who cheats society would be an unjust person. But he says they're only considered an unjust person because they're harming the stronger. And the stronger had made the laws, or if you're the strongest person of all, you're making the laws. And so his argument's essentially that our morality stems from strength, not necessarily that being strong is good, but if you are strong, then you get to define what is good, and everybody will believe you because they really don't have any other choice. The other part of that he gave, besides at the individual level, is what he called the city level, and that's essentially the nation-state level, the political level. So something that might be unjust for an individual might be completely just at the city level just because someone has subverted the city and made the laws in their favor. And whatever seemed unjust before is now just, and people kind of forget whatever the previous regime was. So I thought that was just a very dark and fascinating definition of justice, and it's hard to refute it. Socrates, the wisest man who ever lived, supposedly had a very difficult time refuting this definition of justice. And ultimately, Socrates resorted to appealing to the idea of a soul to refute it. So he's had a couple angles. One, he said, well, if you have a group of people engaged in injustice, they will ultimately degenerate into faction. They won't get along if they think what they're doing is unjust. But then barring that, he said that the soul's virtue cannot be injustice. And some kind of made an argument along those lines, which is basically a metaphysical argument, so I didn't find it all that compelling when it came down to it. And then the other criticism I had, or the idea I wanted to see fleshed out, was that he didn't introduce the role of error here. So we had a fairly obvious contradiction, which was, you can't have people who are engaged in an unjust activity will fall down into quarreling, they won't get along, their morale will be hurt. Like, they'll always be more excited to go into battle if they think justice is on their side. He's talked twice, though, about being an error, about what's good and what's bad. And so sort of the logical extension to me would be, well, what happens if you think you're on the side of justice, but you're mistaken? So you get all the benefits of justice, which is a group of people who get along great, willing to go into battle with one another, but then maybe they're committing some kind of unjust or immoral end. And that might be sort of the most powerful combination of all. Kind of injustice on the outside, justice on the inside. Might remind you of something you've seen before. So that basically brings us up to the present point. Thrasymachus acts like he's convinced, but not really. Thrasymachus kind of wanted to leave the conversation at one point. He's just like, I know I'm right, I'm out of here. And Socrates is like, no, you should stay. And then Thrasymachus says, well, okay, can I give a speech? And Socrates is like, no, you have to use you have to go through the Socratic method with me. and so kind of drags Thrasymachus along through it. But you can tell Thrasymachus' heart really is not in the conversation. He's like, all right, yeah, whatever, okay, sure, soul, virtue, fine, it seems so, Socrates. So it's ultimately that dialogue was sort of disappointing, and so I'm very interested in kind of the role of this Socratic method, and when it breaks down, because we always hear that it's like, oh, the Socratic method, that's the best way to find truth, and ultimately you find that you don't know anything, and that's the note that Socrates leaves on, but it's unsatisfying to me because Thrasymachus wasn't seemingly convinced, and saying that he knows nothing to me looked like a sort of a cop-out because he could not accept sort of this horrible truth that Thrasymachus was presenting, that justice is merely what is advantageous for the stronger. And so he gets out of that, like, if you have have to choose between a horrible truth and knowing nothing, Socrates just says, oh, well, but really, I just know nothing, so I don't know. It's almost, I don't know, maybe it'd be more intellectually courageous to accept the horrible truth. Whatever it may be. So yeah, so that kind of brings us up to the present moment. We've finished book 1, and we're going to dive into to book 2. I started a little bit, or just kind of looked at the first page here, and it looks like they're going to talk about how it was not very like Thrasymachus' answers were not very satisfying. And again, I love the difference between kind of truth, belief, persuasion, and the difference whether or not we actually need to know someone's true belief in order to debate it. Intellectually, they keep saying, no, we don't need to, it doesn't matter what you actually believe, we're debating the account, but you kind of know deep down they really care about this idea of true belief, which is difficult. It's difficult to know what Socrates really believes, or any of these guys really believe. Alright, so let's start book 2 here. This C.D.C. Reeve edition. Please don't copy strike me. I guess this is, okay, yeah, the Embraces is 36, so I think this is like, if you're reading the paperback edition or hardback edition, it's page 36. All right, book 2, here we go. Socrates' narration continues. When I had said this, Socrates says, I thought I had done with the discussion, but it all turned out to be only a prelude, as it were. You see, Glaucon, who was always very courageous in everything, refused on this occasion, too, to accept Thrasymachus' capitulation. Instead, he said... Okay, so this is... Glaucon kind of feels like the reader, like playing the role of the reader. And he did that before. I think it was Glaucon and Cleitophon had a little side debate, or recapitulation in the first book, where I think it was Thrasymachus and Socrates were talking for a while, and then Glaucon and Cleitophon were like, wait, what did he just say? And so it's, I don't know, it's kind of nice to, oh, here comes a plane. Can you see it? Can you see it? There it is. It's kind of nice to have a character that's kind of on your side, and I think that is the character of Glaucon. Sorry, there's a big garbage truck here. Hopefully, this will not continue. It will not continue this way. So yeah, so Glaucon's kind of the Donnie character for the Big Lebowski fans out there. All right, so Glaucon is saying, no way, Thrasymachus, that was not a real capitulation. So Glaucon says, do you want to seem to have persuaded us, Socrates, that it is better in every way to be just rather than unjust? Or you don't want to really persuade us of this? Okay, so here's kind of the role of true belief coming back. Socrates, I want to really persuade you, if I can. Glaucon, well then, you certainly are not doing what you want. Tell me, do you think there is a sort of good we welcome, not because we desire its consequences, but because we would choose to have it for its own sake? Enjoying, for example, all the harmless pleasures from which nothing results afterward beyond enjoying having them. This is really weird sentence construction here. Okay, so enjoying, I guess, is just like the gerund. So I guess Glaucon's kind of taken the charge here with the Socratic questioning. Okay, so is there a sort of good we welcome kind of in itself, rather than some like with an eye toward something else? Just like a nice meal. Socrates. Certainly, I think there's such a thing. Glaucon. And is there a sort of good we love for its own sake, and also for the sake of its consequences, knowing, for example, and seeing and being healthy? For we welcome such things, I imagine, on both counts. Yeah, okay, so knowledge, sight, and health. We like having them, we like the things that they lead to. Socrates, yes. Glaucon. And do you also recognize a third kind of good, which includes physical training, medical treatment when sick, and both medicine itself and ways of making money? We would say that these are burdensome, but beneficial to us, and we would not choose to have them for their own sake, but for the sake of their rewards and other consequences. Okay, so he's got three types of things here. Let's kind of spell it out. So we got the things we enjoy now and things we enjoy later. So some things we just enjoy now and we don't really care about later. Other things we enjoy now and we care about later. And then other things are not enjoyable now, but we get some benefit from later down the road. And they're just things we just don't enjoy ever. But we're not talking about those. Okay. Glaucon. In which of these three do you place justice? Ooh. Is justice for now or later or what? Socrates. I myself put it in the finest one. The one that anyone who is going to be blessed with happiness must love both because of itself and because of its consequences. Okay, so this, Socrates, we haven't really asked why we want justice. So far it's a very intuitive idea, almost just an emotional idea, like we feel like there should be justice, and then we try to figure out what it is. But there's no proof from the outset that justice actually can exist. And so here's he's saying he's relating it to someone blessed with happiness, which is kind of, I keep thinking back to Cephalus, like that's the guy who's blessed with happiness. And he wants nothing to do with this conversation. But, okay, so love it in itself and because of the consequences of justice. Glaucon. That is not what the masses think. On the contrary, they think it is of the burdensome kind. The one that must be practiced for the sake of the rewards and the popularity that are the consequences of a good reputation. But that it is to be avoided as intrinsically burdensome. Like, yeah, I don't want to be a just person. What a pain. Socrates. I know that is the general view. Thrasymachus has been faulting justice and praising injustice on these grounds for some time. But it seems that I am a slow learner. Yeah, that clever Socrates. He's always praising his interlocutors and self-deprecating. Or deprecating himself, I should say. Glaucon. Come on then. Listen to what I have to say as well, and see whether you will still have that problem. You see, I think Thrasymachus gave up before he had to, as if he were a snake you had charmed. Yet, to my way of thinking, there was still no demonstration on either side. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you, Glaucon. For I want to hear what justice and injustice are, and what power each has when it is just by itself in the soul. I want to leave out of account the rewards and the consequences of each of them. Okay, so we're just looking at this first half. So if you agree, I will renew the argument of Thrasymachus. Okay, picking up the mantle. He's the heir to the discussion, much like Polemarchus. First, I will state what sort of thing people consider justice to be, and what its origins are. Second, I will argue that all who practice it do so unwillingly, as something necessary, not as something good. Third, I will argue that they have good reason to act as they do, for the life of the unjust person is, they say, much better than that of the just one. I like how Glaucon's kind of giving us an outline of his argument in advance. All these other guys are just like, okay, why are you talking about doctors and ship's captains? Where's this going? And that's always Socrates laying the trap, so they can't the person has a hard time kind of thinking ahead in order to refute Socrates. Glaucon seems like a much, like, more above-board sort of player. It isn't, Socrates, that I believe any of that myself. I'm perplexed indeed, and my ears are deafened, listening to Thrasymachus and countless others. But I've yet to hear anyone defend justice in the way I want, as being better than injustice. I want to hear it praised on its own, and I think that I'm most likely to learn this from you. That is why I'm going to speak at length in praise of the unjust life. All right, what is this? Advocatus Diabolus? By doing so, I will be showing you the way I want to hear you denouncing injustice and praising justice. But see whether you want me to do what I am saying or not. Okay, so Glaucon's just saying, all right, I want you to praise justice, but to start, I'm just going to sing the praises of injustice, and you need to kind of do I want you to, like Socrates, I want you to defend justice, and I'll be on the other side of the argument. All right, Socrates, I want it most of all. Indeed, what subject could a person with any sense enjoy talking and hearing about more often? Yeah, Cephalus would disagree. He is not hearing this. Glaucon, excellent sentiments. Now, listen to what I said I was going to discuss first. What justice is like and what its origins are. People say, you see, that to do injustice is naturally good, and to suffer injustice bad. But the badness of suffering it far exceeds the goodness of doing it. Hence, those who have done and suffered injustice and who have tasted both, ones who lack the power to do it and avoid suffering it, decide that it is profitable to come to an agreement with each other neither to do injustice nor to suffer it. As a result, they begin to make laws and covenants. And what the law commands, they call lawful and just. Okay, so this is great. This is like kind of the origin of laws, which I think is an infinitely fascinating topic. And something that makes reading Westerns really interesting, and also some science fiction interesting if you want to watch the other videos here on the channel. Okay, so he's saying this is sort of starting from the state of nature, and they're like sick of the injustice of, like, they're like, I lose a lot more by getting hit than I gain by hitting somebody, so let's just outlaw hitting, and that'll be the new definition of justice, whatever these laws prescribe and proscribe. Okay, that, they say, is the origin and very being of justice. It is in between the best and the worst. The best is to do injustice without paying the penalty. The worst is to suffer it without being able to take revenge. That is the worst, no revenge. Justice is in the middle between these two extremes. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so it's like, I'm hitting people, that's the best if I get to hit somebody with no repercussions. And the worst is being hit and not being able to punch back. And he's saying, well, yeah, we find a happy medium, and that's just, again, no hitting. No hitting. People love it, not because it is a good thing, but because they're too weak to do injustice with impunity. Someone who has the power to do it, however, someone who is a real man, would not make an agreement with anyone, neither to do injustice nor to suffer it. For him, that would be insanity. Okay, so this is saying, okay, people, basically, if I'm like a weak person, and if I hit somebody I know I'm going to get punched back, then I love laws and justice, because otherwise I can't really do anything. But the real man here is not very happy about this, because he's like, well, before there were laws, I could just hit anybody I wanted, and nothing bad would happen to me, and now we have laws, and now I go to jail. Why is that good for me? This is no Pareto improvement. So he says, for him, that would be insanity. That is the nature of justice, according to the argument, Socrates, and those are its natural origins. We can see most clearly that those who practice it do so unwillingly, because they lack the power to do injustice, if we imagine the following thought experiment. Suppose we grant to the just and the unjust person the freedom to do whatever they like. We can then follow both of them and see where their appetites would lead, the state of nature. And we will catch the just person red-handed, traveling the same road as the unjust one. The reason for this is the desire to do better than others. Okay, we will catch the just... Okay, so he's saying, once you have laws, the unjust person is the guy who's breaking the law, the just person is the guy obeying the law. But if you got rid of the law, they'd both be... I guess you'd catch them red-handed. Okay, so I'll finish the paragraph here. He says, the reason for this is the desire to do better than others. This is what every natural being naturally pursues as good. But by law and force it is made to deviate from this path and honor equality. So I'm guessing when he's talking about red-handed, it's like you got the just person who normally wouldn't break any laws, and then, society collapses, and he's like, oh, well, if this guy's, I don't know, stealing all this stuff, I don't want to be a sucker, I'm going to steal stuff too. Now that nothing is prohibited. And that's only, the desire to do better than others. That is such a deep psychological insight that nobody wants to feel like a sucker. They would especially have the freedom I'm talking about if they had the power that the ancestor of Gyges of Lydia is said to have possessed. The story goes that he was a shepherd in search of the ruler of Lydia. There was a violent thunderstorm. I love these little side stories. And an earthquake broke open the ground and created a chasm at the place where he was tending his sheep. Oh no. Seeing this, he was filled with amazement and went down. Bad idea. And there, in addition to many other amazing things of which we are told stories, he saw a hollow, bronze horse. There were window-like openings in it, and peeping in he saw a corpse, which seemed to be of more than human size, wearing nothing but a gold ring on its finger. This is great. He took off the ring and came out of the chasm. It's like Lord of the Rings. He wore the ring at the usual monthly meeting of shepherds. Just going to the monthly shepherd meetup that reported to the king on the state of the flocks. And as he was sitting among the others, he happened to turn the setting of the ring toward himself, toward the inside of his hand. When he did this, he became invisible to those sitting near him. This is just like The Hobbit. Oh gosh. Yeah. You think you're so original, Mr. J.R.R. Tolkien? No. You stole it from the Republic. Or from whoever this guy stole it from. And he did this, he became invisible to those sitting near him, and they went on talking as if he had gone. I love that they don't even, someone just sitting at the table just turns invisible, and they're like, oh, did he get up to go to the bathroom? Where did he go? He was amazed at this, and fingering the ring, he turned the setting outward again and became visible. So he experimented with the ring to test whether it indeed had this power, and it did. Uh-oh. Also, The Invisible Man, I think, rips this off. Another H.G. Wells novel. I haven't done it on the channel, but check out The Time Machine. Great book. If he turned the setting inward, he became invisible. If he turned it outward, he became visible again. As soon as he realized this, he arranged to become one of the messengers sent to report to the king. On arriving there, he seduced the king's wife, attacked the king with her help, killed him, and in this way took over the kingdom. Whoa, okay. So I'm just going to relate this briefly back to Thrasymachus, because Thrasymachus had talked about essentially subverting the city-state by covert means. And here we have a much more explicit example of that. And this is fascinating to me just because people didn't really think about covert operations until the 20th century. And it's like, oh yeah, gee, maybe these have something to do with world history. It was just this huge gap in, I think, intellectual history where people just kind of thought everything was as it seemed to be, or when they're talking about political philosophy, they don't talk about this kind of invisible man covert ops. So it's very, very fascinating to me that they're thinking about this in ancient Greece. Let's suppose then that there were two such rings. Oh yeah, so Thrasymachus was saying you overthrow the city-state covert means, and then whatever was unjust now becomes just. And I don't know. It's sort of like this Shakespeare plays from all the, War of the Roses and everything else, where it's just like these kings are constantly fighting and killing each other, and they're like, every time you get a new king, you're like, hey, new king, we love you, you're the best, whatever you say goes. Okay. So let's suppose there were two such rings, one worn by the just person, the other by the unjust. It's a great thought experiment. Now, no one, it seems, would be so incorruptible that he would stay on the path of justice, or bring himself to keep away from other people's possessions and not touch them, when he could take whatever he wanted from the marketplace with impunity, go into people's houses and have sex with anyone he wished, kill or release from prison anyone he wished, and do all the things that would make him like a god among humans. And in so behaving, he would do no differently than the unjust person, but both would pursue the same course. Yeah, so this is really a statement about, or at least a claim about human nature. And if people are giving infinite license and no chance of getting caught, are they just going to do all of these, unjust things? And he's saying, that's the way people are. You really can't trust them. You got to have consequences for actions. People are just not good in themselves, which is kind of, is a good assumption to make when you're designing your political structure. Like, oh, well, that president, he's just such a good person. We'll just let him have all the drones that he wants. This, some would say, is strong evidence that no one is just willingly, but only when compelled. No one believes justice to be a good thing when it is kept private, since whenever either person thinks he can do injustice with impunity, he does it. Indeed, all men believe that injustice is far more profitable to themselves than is justice. And what they believe is true, so the exponent of this argument will say. I guess exponent here means the person expositing it, so the Glaucon in this case, or whatever. What they believe is true. So, okay. For someone who did not want to do injustice, given this sort of opportunity, and who did not touch other people's property, would be thought most wretched and most foolish by everyone aware of the situation. Yeah, you sucker. Don't want to be a sucker, do ya? Though, of course, they would praise him in public, deceiving each other for fear of suffering injustice. So much for my second topic. Okay. Oh, this is fascinating. This is kind of like this, virtue performativity, you might say. And, so it's publicly praising. This is just like, people would, hit the like button, say, oh yeah, this person, I like that this person is a just person even when no one's looking, even though the only reason I'm able to like that is because I was looking, and maybe the only reason I'm liking it is so that other people can see that I like it. So he's saying, you get rid of all the public performance aspect, and people are terrible. This is what his argument is. So much for my second topic. As for decision itself, about the life of the two we are discussing, if we contrast the extremes of justice and injustice, we shall be able to make the decision correctly. But if we don't, we won't. Okay, so we got to contrast the extremes. What then is the contrast I have in mind? It is this. We will subtract nothing from the injustice of the unjust person and nothing from the justice of the just one. On the contrary, we will take each to be perfect in his own pursuit. So it's like, we're going to put up Hitler against Gandhi and see which one wins or which one is happier. First then, let the unjust person act like a clever craftsman. That craftsmanship just keeps coming back. An eminent ship's captain or doctor, for example, knows the difference between what his craft can and cannot do. He attempts the first but lets the second go by. And if he happens to slip, he can put things right. There's the role of error once more. In the same way, if he is to be completely unjust, let the unjust person correctly attempt unjust acts and remain undetected. Okay, so the one who is caught should be thought inept. Okay, so I think he's saying when we're considering Gandhi versus Hitler, this has got to be like perfect like robot Hitler, and then like super Angel Gandhi. So Angel Gandhi doesn't do anything wrong, and Robo Hitler doesn't make any mistakes. For the extreme of injustice is to be believed to be just without actually being so. Oh. That's, whew. There it is, right there. That kind of gave me the chills. Because that's the core, I think, of perhaps a lot of injustice out there. Is people thinking that other people are just and not necessarily knowing their true nature. And our completely unjust person must be given complete injustice. Nothing must be subtracted from it. We must allow that, while doing the greatest injustice, he has nonetheless provided himself with the greatest reputation for justice. Okay, so this is like Hitler with good PR. If he does happen to slip up, he must be able to put it right, either through his ability to speak persuasively if any of his unjust activities are discovered. Ooh, there's persuasion coming back once again. Or to use force if force is needed, because he is courageous and strong and has provided himself with wealth and friends. Okay, so this is just constructing the Robo-Hitler, who looks like Gandhi, and if anything's uncovered, he can kind of talk his way out of it. Okay, or use force. Having hypothesized such a person, let's now put the just man next to him in our argument. Angel Gandhi. Someone who is simple and noble, and who, as Aeschylus says, does not want to be believed to be good, but to be so. Gandhi had pretty good PR. We must take away his reputation. For a reputation for justice would bring him honor and rewards, so that it would not be clear whether he is being just for the sake of justice, or for the sake of those honors and rewards. Yeah, Gandhi, what are you in it for? What's your end game? We must strip him of everything except justice, and make his situation the opposite of the unjust person's. Though he does no injustice, he must have the greatest reputation for it, so that he may be tested with regard to justice by seeing whether or not he can withstand a bad reputation and its consequences. Let him stay like that, unchanged, until he is dead, just but all his life believed to be unjust. In this way, both will reach the extremes, the one of justice and the other of injustice, and we will be able to judge which of them is happier. Wow. Okay, so I love this because this partially addresses what I thought was a gap in Book 1, which is what is the role of error. And here we have errors mentioned in two senses, one in which this person makes a mistake, but they kind of cover up for it, like, Hitler too is fallible, but we're going to pretend like he's infallible. And then we have sort of this public error of perception. So someone is perceived as just or unjust. And oh yeah, I love this because this is just something people don't spend nearly enough time thinking about. At least, I don't know. You see something on the Facebook feed like, oh, this is what such a great person. I just love everything they do. It's like, well, do you know everything they do? How do you know? Or on the other hand, like, oh, this person's awful. Oh my God, they're just the worst. It's like, well, do they just have a reputation for that, or are they actually the worst? How do you know? Okay. Socrates. Whew! My dear Glaucon, how vigorously you have scoured each of the men in our competition, just as you would a pair of statues for an art competition. Yeah, Glaucon. I didn't give Glaucon enough credit at first. I just thought he's a little companion here. But this is like Donnie giving an amazing speech. Glaucon, I'm doing the best I can. Since the two are, as I have described in any case, should not be difficult to complete the account of the sort of life that awaits each of them. Also, I like Socrates' interruption here, just because it breaks up this long speech. You'll see that a lot in Shakespeare. Somebody's just going on, and then finally somebody's like, "Oh man, great speech, bro. Keep it up." It's like, thanks. I'll continue. Okay, breaking up the monotony. Since the two artists I have described in any case, it should not be difficult to complete the account of the sort of life that awaits each of them. But it must be done. And if what I say sounds crude, Socrates, remember that it is not I who speak, but those who praise injustice at the expense of justice. Okay, so he's just saying, I'm just playing a character here who praises injustice. They will say that the just person in such circumstances will be whipped, stretched on a rack, chained, blinded with a red-hot iron, and at the end, when he has suffered every sort of bad thing, he will be impaled, and will realize then that one should not want to be just, but to believed to be just. Society getting you down. For people will say that it is really the unjust person who does not want to be believed to be unjust, but actually to be so, because he bases his practice on the truth about things and does not allow reputation to regulate his life. He is the one who harvests a deep furrow in his mind where wise counsels propagate. First, okay, so he's talking about the unjust person. Yeah, people will say it's really... Let me just read that again. He'll say the unjust person who does not want to be believed to be unjust. So, I'm unjust. Yeah, I don't want to be believed. I don't want people to think I'm unjust. I would just want to be it. And I base my practice on the truth about things and not allow reputation to regulate my life. Yeah, I'm just a bad person. Yeah, with a reputation for justice. So first, he rules the city because of his reputation for justice. Next, he marries into any family he wishes, gives his children in marriage to anyone he wishes, has contracts and partnerships with anyone he wants. And besides benefiting himself in all these ways, he profits because he has no scruples about doing injustice. In any contest, public or private, he is the winner and does better than his enemies. And by doing better than them, he becomes wealthy, benefits his friends, and harms his enemies. He makes adequate sacrifices to the gods and sets up magnificent offerings to them, and takes much better care of the gods, indeed, of the human beings he favors, than the just person. So he may reasonably expect that the gods, in turn, will love him more than the just person. That is why they say, Socrates, that gods and humans provide a better life for the unjust person than for the just one. Yeah, who's happier? I'm thinking the unjust person is living the good life. When Glaucon had said this, I had it in mind to respond, is Socrates talking, but his brother Adeimantus intervened. You surely do not think that the argument has been adequately stated. Oh, Socrates, why shouldn't I? This is a pretty compelling argument. Adeimantus, the most important point has not been mentioned. Uh-oh, he's going to strengthen this argument even more. Whew, I don't know if I can take this. This is a horrible world to contemplate. Socrates, well then, as the saying goes, a man's brother must stand by him. So Glaucon has admitted something. You must help him, though. For my part, at any rate, what he has already said is quite enough to throw me to the canvas and make me incapable of coming to the aid of justice. Adeimantus, nonsense. But listen to what more I have to say as well. You see, in order to clarify what Glaucon has in mind, we should also fully explore the arguments that are opposed to the ones he gave, those that praise justice and disparage injustice. I just love this as like an attention-keeping mechanism, just throwing these characters in, like a TV show. As you know, when fathers speak to their sons and give them advice, they say that one must be just, and as do all those who have others in their charge. But they do not praise justice itself, only the good reputation it brings. The inducement they offer is that if we are reputed to be just, then, as the result of our reputation, we will get political offices, good marriages, and all the things that Glaucon recently said that the just man would get as a result of having a good reputation. But these people have even more to say about the consequences of reputation. For by throwing in being well thought of by the gods, they have plenty of good things to talk about, all the ones the gods are said to give to those who are pious. For example, the noble Hesiod and Homer say such things. For Hesiod says that the gods make the oak trees bear acorns at the top, bees in the middle, and fleecy sheep heavy laden with wool, for those who are just, and tells of many other good things akin to these. And Homer says pretty much the same. I guess this is Homer talking. When a good king in his piety upholds justice, the black earth bears wheat and barley for him, and his trees are heavy with fruit. His sheep bear lambs unfailingly, and the sea yields up his fish. That's a nice thought. Musaeus and his son claim that the gods give just people even more exciting goods than these. In their account, they lead the just to Hades, seat them on couches, provide them with a symposium of pious people, nothing better than that, crown them with wreaths, and make them spend all their time drinking, as if they thought eternal drunkenness was the finest wage of virtue. Others stretch even further the wages that virtue receives from the gods, for they say that someone who is pious and keeps his promises leaves his children's children and a whole race behind him. In these and other similar ways they praise justice. But the impious and unjust they bury in mud in Hades, and they force them to carry water in a sieve. They bring them into bad repute while they are still alive. And all those penalties that Glaucon gave to just people who are thought to be unjust, they give to the unjust ones. But they have nothing else to say. Okay, so he's just saying, all right, all these writers tell us that the gods know the truth. And that's probably one of the most powerful ideas in the history of civilization, is that the king can't see what you're doing, but the gods are watching, and they will punish you accordingly. And that's almost the only way out of this dilemma of the difference between perception and reality, is if everybody's on board with being watched by some kind of objective observer, so that no one can seem to be just but be unjust. So yeah, we'll see where he's going. That, then, is the praise and blame given to each. But in addition, Socrates, there's another kind of argument about justice and injustice for you to consider. One that is used both by private individuals and by poets. With one voice, they all chant the hymn that justice and temperance are fine things, but difficult and onerous ones, while intemperance and injustice are sweet and easy to acquire, and are only shameful by repute and convention. Okay, so the poets are saying, yeah, temperance is fine, but it's really a pain. But man, intemperance, that is easy, and the only thing bad about it is people talking about it. It's actually kind of fun. They also say that unjust deeds are, for the most part, more profitable than just ones. And whereas they are perfectly willing to bestow public and private honors on bad people, provided they have wealth and other types of power, and to declare them to be happy, they dishonor and disregard those who happen to be in any way weak or poor, even though they admit that they are better than the others. So who are they? So I guess it's these poets saying, they're like, yeah, we'll honor bad people who have power, and if you're poor, yeah, we don't really have anything for you. Like, okay, yeah, you're better than the rich guy, but we're not giving like a banquet or lifetime achievement award to the homeless person. But so yeah, it's kind of, I guess these are sort of the cynical folks. But most amazing of all are the accounts they give of the gods and virtue, and how it is that the gods too assign misfortune and a bad life to many good people, and the opposite fate to their opposites. Begging priests and prophets go to the doors of rich people and persuade them that, through sacrifices and incantations, they have acquired a God-given power. If the rich person or any of his ancestors has committed an injustice, they can fix it with pleasant rituals. That's a good job to have. And if he wishes to injure an enemy, he will be able to harm a just one or an unjust one alike at little cost, since by means of spells and enchantments they can persuade the gods to do their bidding. Okay. Not sure. Alright. He's just talking about these priests peddling redemption, or, I don't know, voodoo doctors. And the poets are brought forward as witnesses to all these accounts. Some harp on the ease of vice on the grounds that vice in abundance is easy to get. The road is smooth and begins beside you, but the gods have put sweat between us and virtue. And a road that is long, rough, and steep. Others quote Homer to bear witness that the gods can be influenced by humans, since he too said, even the gods themselves can be swayed by prayer and with sacrifices and soothing promises, incense and libation drinking. Human beings turn them from their purpose when someone has transgressed and sinned. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like the human gods. They're like, I know you're supposed to punish me, but here, have some sacrifices. And they present a noisy throng of books by Musaeus and Orpheus, who are the offspring, they claim, of Selene and the Muses, on which they based their rituals. And they persuade not only private individuals, but whole cities, that there are in fact absolutions and purifications for unjust deeds. For the living, these consist of ritual sacrifices and pleasant games. But there are also special rites for the dead. These initiations, as they call them, free people from evils hereafter, while terrible things await those who have not performed the rituals. With so many things of this sort, my dear Socrates, being said about virtue and vice, and about how human beings and gods honor them, what effect do we suppose they have on the souls of young people? I mean those who are naturally gifted and able to flit, so to speak, from one of these sayings to another, and gather from them an impression of what sort of people they should be, and of how best to travel the road of life. I love that. How best to travel the road of life. I mean, this is so true, and you see why Socrates might be tried for corrupting the youth of Athens. It's like, the youth are just, flitting about from saying to saying, from YouTube channel to YouTube channel, forum to forum, trying to figure out how to live life. He would surely ask himself Pindar's question, is it by justice or by crooked tricks that I will scale the higher wall, and so live out my life surrounded by secure defenses? And he will answer, as for what people say, they say that there is no advantage in my being just if I am not also thought just. Again, here's the, like, you gotta have the two things, it's like, at the very beginning, Cephalus tells the story of, like, the Seriphian, who's like, okay, I'm only famous because I'm from Athens, but you wouldn't be famous if you were from Athens, and you gotta, to be happy, you need money, but you also need to be a good person. And so here it's, you need to be just, and people need to think that you're just. And that's the same argument appeared with the Polemarchus and with Thrasymachus, where they're just talking about it's helping your friends who are all actually friends. So they're perceived to be good, and they are good. And here, once more, they say there's no advantage in being just if you're not also thought just, whereas the troubles and penalties of being just are apparent. But the unjust person who has secured for himself a reputation for justice lives the life of a god. So this is the unjust person who seems just. He's got it figured out. Since then, opinion forcibly overcomes truth and controls happiness, as the wise men say, I must surely turn entirely to it. I should create an illusionist painting of virtue around me to deceive those who come near, but keep behind it the wise Archilochus's greed and cunning fox. Okay, so he's answering. Okay, so this is the young person speaking. The young person's like, there's no advantage in being just unless you're just, but if I'm unjust and people think I'm just, I live like a god. Opinion forcibly overcomes truth. I should create an illusionist painting of virtue around me. was that trompe-l'oeil, and deceive around me to deceive those who come near, but keep it behind the wise Archilochus's greed and cunning fox. Okay, yeah, so we say the young people are going to just think, all right, I'm just going to seem just and be unjust, do whatever I want. Yeah, keep that Facebook feed clean, boys and girls. But surely someone will object. It's not easy for evil to remain always hidden. We will reply that nothing great is easy. And in any case, if we are to be happy, we must go where the tracks of the arguments lead. To remain undiscovered, we will form secret societies and political clubs. And there are teachers of persuasion to make us clever in dealing with assemblies and law courts. Therefore, partly by persuasion, partly by force, we will contrive to do better than other people without paying the penalty. So it's all right, here's some unjust people getting together in secret societies. Isn't that interesting? But surely we cannot hide from the gods or overpower them by force. Yeah, I think the only way out of this argument is an appeal to the gods, or to the soul. Well, if the gods do not exist, or do not concern themselves with human affairs, why should we worry at all about hiding from them? On the other hand, if they do exist and do care about us, we know nothing about them, except what we have learned from the laws and from the poets who give their genealogies. But these are the very people who tell us that the gods can be persuaded and influenced by sacrifices, gentle prayers, and offerings. Hence, we should believe them on both matters, or on neither. If we believe them, we should be unjust and offer sacrifices from the fruits of our injustice. For if we are just, our only gain is not to be punished by the gods, but we will lose the profits of our injustice. But if we are unjust, we get those profits, and afterward we will entreat the gods, and persuading them, escape with our crimes and transgressions unpunished. All right, you see what he's saying here? He's saying our only source of information about the gods is the poets. And the poets say that we can influence the gods with a sacrifice. So we either trust the poets' account or we don't. We can't just invent a version of the gods out of nothing. So in either case, looks like the unjust path is the way to go. This argument, of course, changes when you have a god who does not accept sacrifices from the fruits of your injustice. Like, it's kind of the genius part about Christianity. It's like, oh, well, you don't have to sacrifice anything. I already did. Now you owe me, because I already made the sacrifice. What are you going to do about that? Okay. And I'm watching everything you do. But in Hades, we won't pay the penalty for crimes committed here, either ourselves or through our children's children. So this is the person objecting to Glaucon's argument. Or the hypothetical young man's argument. My friend, the young man will say as he does his rational calculation, mystery rites and the gods of absolution have great power. The greatest cities tell us this, as do those children of the gods who have become the gods' poets and prophets and reveal it to be so. What is this saying? Okay, so I guess he's saying that you make these sacrifices and you won't be punished in Hades either. On the basis of what further argument, then, should we choose justice over the greatest injustice? For if we possess such injustice with a false facade, we will do as we have a mind to among gods and humans, both while we are living and when we are dead, as both the masses and the eminent claim. So given all that has been said, Socrates, what device could get someone with any power, whether of mind, wealth, body, or family, to be willing to honor justice and not laugh aloud when he hears it praised? Ha 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 ha, justice. Indeed, if anyone can show that what we have said is false and has adequate knowledge that justice is best, what he feels for unjust people won't be anger, but a large measure of forgiveness. After all, he knows that apart from someone of godlike character who is disgusted by doing injustice, or someone who has gained knowledge and avoids injustice for that reason, no one is just willingly. Okay, so yeah, the only person who is just willingly is someone with godlike character or someone who has gained knowledge. I'm not sure what knowledge that is. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he's saying that the only emotion that keeps people just if they don't have to be, if they're not punished externally, is if they're disgusted by it. Through cowardice or old age or some other weakness, people do indeed object to injustice. It's like, yeah, it's just the old and weak objecting to injustice. But it is obvious that they do so only because they lack the power to do injustice. For the first of them to gain that power is the first to do as much injustice as he can. Woo-wee! It's like when the superhero first gets his superpower. Like, oh yeah, open season, baby. And all this has no other cause than the one that led to the whole of Glaucon's in my art. Oh, sorry. I kept thinking this is Glaucon. This is Glaucon's brother. Glaucon's in my argument with you, Socrates. But honestly, Thrasymachus, Glaucon, and Adeimantus all sound like the exact same person. I think he's just put in body doubles. Socrates, you amazing man, we said. Of all of you who claim to praise justice, beginning from the earliest heroes of old whose accounts survive up to the men of the present day, not one has ever blamed injustice or praised justice except by mentioning the reputations, honors, and rewards that are their consequences. No one has ever adequately described what each does itself through its own power, by its presence in the soul of the person who possesses it, even if it remains hidden from gods and humans. No one, whether in poetry or in private discussions, has adequately argued that injustice is the greatest evil a soul can have in it, and justice the greatest good. If all of you had spoken in this way and had tried to persuade us from our earliest youth, we would not now be guarding against one another's injustice, but each would be his own best guardian, afraid that by doing injustice, he would be living on intimate terms with the worst thing possible. Okay, so he's almost blaming his elders here, is that right? Yeah, he's like, all right, all you guys praising justice, you're just saying I'll have a good reputation for it. I see what a crock that is. I'm just going to go get the reputation without actually having to do it. If you had spoken to us in this way and tried to say injustice is the greatest evil the soul can have, if you had been making this argument about our souls, we would have thought different. But instead, you corrupted us. Thanks, Dad. That, Socrates, and probably other things in addition, are what Thrasymachus, or possibly someone else, might say in discussing justice and injustice, crudely inverting their power, in my view. Possibly someone else is interesting here. So if you were to say Plato's real view on this is Thrasymachus is the real hero here of this story, then maybe that possibly someone else might be a little hint that this is Plato's real view. I think that's the Straussian argument, but I don't actually know enough about that to say. But possibly someone else. That just seems like a hint. I don't know. Okay, crudely inverting their power in my view. But for I have no reason to hide anything from you, want to hear the opposite from you. And that is why I am speaking with all the force I can muster. So do not merely demonstrate to us by argument that justice is stronger than injustice, but tell us what each one itself does, because of itself, to someone who possesses it, that makes the one bad and the other good. Follow Glaucon's advice, and do not take reputations into account. For if you do not deprive justice and injustice of their true reputations and attach false ones to them, we will say that it is not justice you are praising, but its reputation, nor injustice you are condemning, but its reputation, and that you are encouraging us to be unjust, but keep it secret. In that case, we will say that you agree with Thrasymachus that justice is the good of another, the advantage of the stronger, while injustice is one's own advantage and profit, though not the advantage of the weaker. You agree that justice is one of the greatest goods, the ones that are worth having for the sake of their consequences, but much more so for their own sake, such as seeing, hearing, knowing, being healthy, of course, and all the others that are genuine goods by nature and not simply by repute. This is what I want you to praise about justice. How does it, because of its very self, benefit its possessors, and how does injustice harm him? Leave wages and reputations for others to praise. I can put up with other people praising justice and blaming injustice in that way, extolling the reputations and wages of the one and denigrating those of the other. But I won't put up with that from you, unless you insist on it. I won't take this at all from you, unless you make me. For you have spent your whole life investigating this and nothing else. So do not merely demonstrate to us by argument that justice is stronger than injustice, but show what effect each one itself has because of itself on the person who has it. The one for good, the other for bad, whether it remains hidden from gods and human beings or not. Now, I had always admired the natural characters of Glaucon and Adeimantus, but I was especially pleased when I heard what they had to say on this occasion. And I replied, I'm just going to skip ahead here. Okay. Whew. Okay, so he's replying. Sons of that man, Glaucon's lover was not wrong to begin the elegy he wrote when you distinguished yourselves at the Battle of Megara by addressing you as sons of Ariston, godlike family of a famous man. That, my dear friends, was well said, in my view, for something altogether godlike must have affected you if you were not convinced that injustice is better than justice, and yet can speak like that on its behalf. Okay, so Socrates is saying, that was such an amazing speech, you have to believe it. And I do believe that you really are unconvinced by your own words. And I think it's also like, it's such a horrible conclusion to reach. There's no way you really believe that. I infer this from your general character, since if I had only your arguments to go on, I would not trust you. The more I trust you, however, the more I am at a loss as to what to do. I do not see how I can be of help. Indeed, I believe I am incapable of it. This is more Socratic self-deprecation. Here's my evidence. I thought what I said to Thrasymachus showed that justice is better than injustice, but you won't accept that from me as proof. That's the stuff about the soul's virtue. On the other hand, I do not see how I can refuse my help, for I fear that it may be impious to have breath in one's body and the ability to speak, and yet stand idly by and not defend justice when it is being prosecuted. The best thing, then, is to give justice any assistance that I can. Glaucon and the others begged me not to abandon the argument, but to help in every way to track down what justice and injustice each is and the truth about their respective benefits, so I told them what I had in mind. The investigation we're undertaking is not an easy one, Socrates says, in my view, but requires keen eyesight. So, since we are not clever people, I think we should adopt the method of investigation that we would use if, lacking keen eyesight, we were told to identify small letters from a distance, and then notice that the same letters existed elsewhere in a larger size and on a larger surface. This is, I don't know. This is a common technique in mathematics. You solve an equivalent problem. It's easier. We would consider it a godsend, I think, to be allowed to identify the larger ones first and then to examine the smaller ones to see whether they really are the same. Okay. Adeimantus. Of course we would. But how is this case similar to our investigation of justice in your view? Socrates. I will tell you. We say, don't we, that there's a justice that belongs to a single man and also that belongs to a whole city? Important distinction. Adeimantus. Certainly. Socrates. And a city is larger than a single man? Adeimantus. Yes, it is larger. Socrates. Perhaps then there will be more justice in the larger thing, and it will be easier to discern. So if you're willing, let's first find out what sort of thing justice is in cities, and afterward look for it in the individual to see if the larger entity is similar in form to the smaller one. This might be the key idea in all of political thought, is comparing the state to the individual. Even on the cover of the Leviathan. Adeimantus. I think that's a fine idea. Socrates. If, in our discussion, we could look at a city coming to be, wouldn't we also see its justice coming to be and its injustice as well? Adeimantus. We probably would. Okay. So I guess he's saying, alright, we might not perceive justice in the individual, but at the city level, you know a just city when you see it. Socrates. And once that process is completed, could we expect to find what we are looking for more easily? Adeimantus. Yes, much more easily. So is he saying, at a city coming to be? Okay, so I think he's saying it's easiest to see justice if we look at the origin of the city, whether that's a just beginning or an unjust beginning. Socrates. You think we should try to carry it out then? It's no small task in my view. So, think it over. Adeimantus. It has been thought over. Don't do anything besides try. Socrates. Well, then, a city comes to exist, I believe, because none of us is individually self-sufficient, but each has many needs he cannot satisfy. Or do you think a city is founded on some other principle? Adeimantus. No, none. We need each other. Socrates. Then because we have many needs, and because one of us calls on another out of one need, and on a third out of a different need, we gather many into a single settlement as partners and helpers. And we call such a shared settlement a city. Isn't that so? Adeimantus. Yes, indeed. Socrates. And if they share things with one another, they give something to one another or take something from one another, don't they do so because each believes that it is better for himself? Okay, so this is like the mutually beneficial city starting, I guess. Adeimantus. Of course. Come on then, let's in our discussion create a city from the beginning. But its real creator, it seems, will be our need. Hoo-hoo. Clever. Certainly. Socrates. Now, the first and greatest of our needs is to provide food in order to sustain existence in life. It's like Maslow's hierarchy. Adeimantus. Yes, absolutely. Socrates. The second is for shelter, and the third is for clothes and things of that sort. Adeimantus. That's right. Tell me then, how will a city be able to provide all this? Won't one person have to be a farmer, another a builder, and another a weaver? Shouldn't we add a shoemaker to them, or someone else to take care of our bodily needs? Of course. A city with the barest necessities, then, would consist of 4 or 5 men. Apparently. Well then, should each of them contribute his work for the common use of all? I mean, should a farmer, although he is only one person, provide food for 4 people and spend quadruple the time and labor to provide food to be shared by them all? Or should he not be concerned about everyone else? Should he produce 1/4 of the food and 1/4 of the time for himself alone? Should he spend the other 3/4 providing a house, a cloak, and shoes? Should he save himself the bother of sharing with other people and mind his own business on his own? Alright, so it's like, do we have division of labor or not? The first alternative, Socrates, is perhaps easier. There's nothing strange in that, by Zeus. You see, it occurred to me while you were speaking that in the first place, we are not all born alike. On the contrary, each of us differs somewhat in nature from the others, one being suited to one job, another to another. Or don't you think so? I do. Well then, would one person do better work if he practiced many crafts, or if he practiced one? If he practiced one, he'd be better. This is like 2,000 years ahead of Adam Smith. And it's also clear, I take it, that if one misses the opportune moment in any job, the work is spoiled. It is clear. That, I take it, is because the thing that has to be done won't wait until the doer has the leisure to do it. No, instead the doer must of necessity pay close attention to what has to be done, and not leave it for his idle moments. Yes, he must. The result, then, is that more plentiful and better quality goods are more easily produced if each one does one thing for which he is naturally suited and does it at the opportune moment because his time is freed from all the others. This is like economics 101. This is great. Adeimantus, absolutely. Then, Adeimantus, we're going to need more than 4 citizens to provide the things we have mentioned. For a farmer won't make his own plow, it seems, if it's going to be a good one, nor his hoe, nor any of his other farm implements. Nor will a carpenter, and he too needs a lot of tools. And the same is true of a weaver and a shoemaker, isn't it? It is. So carpenters, metalworkers, and many other craftsmen of that sort will share our little city and make it bigger. Yes, indeed. Yet it still would not be a great settlement, even if we added cowherds, shepherds, and other herdsmen, so that the farmers would have cows to do their plowing, the builders oxen to share with the farmers in hauling their materials, and the weavers and shoemakers hides and fleeces to use. Adeimantus. It would not be a small city either, if it had to hold all that. Socrates. Moreover, it is almost impossible at any rate to establish the city itself in the sort of place where it will need no imports. Yes, that is impossible. And we need still other people who will import whatever is needed from another city. We will. And if our servant goes empty-handed to another city, without any of the things needed by those from whom he is trying to get what his own people need, he will come away empty-handed, won't he? I should think so. Our citizens, then, must produce not only enough for themselves at home, but also goods of the right quality and quantity to satisfy the needs of others. Yes, they must. So we'll need more farmers and other craftsmen in our city. Okay, he's like playing Sim City here, Civilization. It's like, oh yeah, we need some more of these, Keep growing, keep growing. Okay, yes. And also other servants, I imagine, who are to take care of imports and exports. Those are merchants, aren't they? Yes. We'll need merchants too, then. Of course. And if the trade is carried on by sea, we'll need a great many others who have expert knowledge of the business of the sea. Adeimantus, a great many indeed. Again, within the city itself, how will people share with one another the things that they produce? It was in order to share, after all, that we associated with one another and founded a city. Adeimantus, clearly, they must do it by buying and selling. They will need a marketplace and a currency for such exchange. Yes, indeed. So if a farmer or any other craftsman brings some of his products to the marketplace and he does not arrive at the same time as those who want to exchange things with him, is he to sit idly in the marketplace neglecting his own craft? Adeimantus, no, not at all. On the contrary, there will be people who notice the situation and provide the requisite service. In well-organized cities, they are generally those whose bodies are weakest and who are not fit to do any sort of work. Their job is to wait there in the marketplace and exchange money for the goods of those who have something to sell, and then to exchange the goods for the money of those who want to buy them. Socrates, this need then causes retailers to be present in our city. Those who wait in the marketplace and provide the service of buying and selling are called retailers, aren't they? Whereas those who travel between cities are merchants? Yeah, what is it? He who waits also serves. Everybody's mad at the jobbers and middlemen, but they're providing a valuable service to this ideal society. Adeimantus, yes, that's right. Socrates, there are also other servants, I think, whose minds would not altogether qualify them for membership in our community, but whose bodies are strong enough for hard labor. So they sell the use of their strength for a price called a wage, and that is why they are called wage earners. Isn't that so? Yes. So the wage earners, too, it seems, serve to complete our city. Thank God. I think so. Well then, Adeimantus, has our city now grown to completeness? Maybe it has. Then where are justice and injustice to be found in it? With which of the people we considered did they come in? I have no idea, Socrates, unless it is somewhere in some... Excuse me. There's some motorcycles passing by. I have no idea, Socrates, unless it is somewhere in some need that these people have of one another. Alright, yeah, where's justice in this city? Where are the laws? This is just like Homo economicus making trades. I want to see some murders. Not really. Perhaps what you say is right. We must look into it and not back off. First then, see what sort of life people will lead who have been provided for in this way. They will make food, wine, clothes, and shoes, won't they? And they will build themselves houses. In the summer, they will mostly work naked and barefoot, but in the winter, they will wear adequate clothing and shoes. For nourishment, they will provide themselves with barley meal and wheat flour, which they will knead and bake into noble cakes and loaves and serve up on a reed or in clean leaves. They will recline on couches strewn with yew and myrtles and feast with their children, drink their wine, and crowned with wreaths hymn the gods. They will enjoy having sex with one another, but they will produce no more children than their resources allow, lest they fall into either poverty or war. That's like Thomas Malthus's argument right there. We have like Socrates presaging Adam Smith and Thomas Malthus. What's next? Ricardo? Alright, at this point, Glaucon interrupted and said, "It seems that you make your people feast without any relishes." Socrates. Okay. True enough. I was forgetting that they will also have relishes. Salt, of course, and olives and cheese, and they will boil roots and vegetables in the way they boil them in the country. We will give them desserts, too, I imagine, consisting of figs, chickpeas, and beans. And they will roast myrtles and acorns before the fire and drink in moderation. So they will live in peace and good health, it seems, and when they die at a ripe old age, they will pass on a similar sort of life to their children. Glaucon. If you were founding a city of pigs, Socrates, isn't that just what you would provide to fatten them? Oh, where's this going? What then would you have me do, Glaucon? Just what is conventional. If they are not to suffer hardship, they should recline on proper couches, I suppose, dine at tables, and have the relishes and desserts that people have nowadays. All right, I understand. It isn't merely the origins of a city that we are considering, it seems, but those of a city that is luxurious, too. And that may not be a bad idea. For by examining such a city, we might perhaps see how justice and injustice grow up in cities. Yet, the true city, in my view, is the one we have described, the healthy one, as it were. But if you also want to look at a feverish city, so be it. There's nothing to stop us. You see, the things I mentioned earlier in the way of life I described won't satisfy some people, it seems. But couches, tables, and other furnitures will have to be added to it, and relishes, of course, and incense, perfumes, prostitutes, pastries, and the multifariousness of each of them. Prostitutes and pastries. In particular, we cannot just provide them with the necessities we mentioned at first, such as houses, clothes, and shoes. No, instead we'll have to get painting and embroidery going, and procure gold and ivory and all sorts of everything of that sort. Isn't that so? Glaucon, yes. Then we'll have to enlarge our city again. The healthy one is no longer adequate. Going up the hierarchy of needs. On the contrary, we must now increase it in size and population and fill it with a multitude of things that go beyond what is necessary for a city. Hunters, for example, and all those imitators. Many of the latter work with shapes and colors, many with music. Poets and their assistants, rhapsodes, actors, choral dancers, theatrical producers. And there will have to be craftsmen of multifarious devices, including, among other things, those needed for the adornment of women. In particular, then, we will need more servants, don't you think, such as tutors, wet nurses, nannies, beauticians, barbers, and relish cooks and meat cooks, too. Moreover, we will also need people to farm pigs. This animal did not exist in our earlier city, since there was no need for it, but we will need it in this one. And we will also need large numbers of other meat-producing animals, won't we, if someone is going to eat them? Glaucon, we certainly will. Socrates, and if we live like that, won't we have a far greater need for doctors than we did before? Yes, far greater. And the land, I take it, that is used to be adequate to feed the population we had then will now be small and inadequate, or don't you agree? I do. Won't we have to seize some of our neighbor's land? Bing, 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 here it goes. Here's the big moment. Here it is. This is it right here. This is political philosophy. Won't we have to seize some of our neighbor's lands then, if we are to have enough for pasture and plowing? And won't our neighbors want to seize part of ours in turn if they too have abandoned themselves to the endless acquisition of money and overstepped the limit of their necessary desires? Glaucon, yes, that is quite inevitable, Socrates. And the next step will be war, Glaucon. Don't you agree? Glaucon, I do. Oh, man. Can you see it? No, maybe not. This is terrible. Socrates. Now, let's not say yet whether the effects of war are good or bad, but only that we have now found the origin of war. It comes from the same factors, the occurrence of which is the source of the greatest evils for cities and the individuals in them. Glaucon, indeed it does. The city must be further enlarged then, my dear Glaucon, and not just a little, but by the size of a whole army. It will do battle with the invaders in defense of the city's wealth and of all the other things we just described. Glaucon, why so? Aren't the inhabitants themselves adequate for the purpose? Alright, this is a failure. I can't do this with planes going by every 3 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. Goodness gracious. This is what happens when you try to record next to a small airport. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and recap the situation right here. I'll do another video to finish up Socrates' argument. So where we started here was the argument of Glaucon kind of picked up the thread of Thrasymachus, and he brought up the role of injustice. Not the role of injustice, the role of deception, and said it certainly looks that if you can seem like you're just but you're actually unjust, you're going to live a much better life than someone who is actually just. And kind of just drags the just person through the mud, saying if he's truly just and doesn't care about honor, then he will seem to be unjust. Oh my God. Go away! I'm trying to read the Republic here. Nobody cares. Yeah, so you got the person who actually is just, but seems unjust, is going to live a terrible life. The person who is actually unjust, but seems just, is going to get all the benefits from being just. And Socrates seems somewhat devastated by this argument and doesn't initially have a good reply. And then Glaucon's brother Adeimantus jumps in the situation, or jumps into the discussion, and says, well, he's actually held back the most important argument of all. And that is, if the gods are what we think they are, then even if we're unjust, if there's some kind of afterlife or whatever, we can basically just bribe the gods with sacrifices. And so that kind of undercuts the metaphysical argument. So before, Socrates had started talking about the role of the soul, and that's why we need justice, because that's the virtue of the soul. But Adeimantus says, well, look, if we go on the accounts of the lawgivers and the poets about who the gods are, then that strengthens the argument for being unjust. And then he kind of takes Socrates to task. He's saying, look, all your arguments for justice have been about receiving honors, but we've shown that you can receive those honors without actually being just, because it's based on human perception. So why don't you provide me an argument? I want to hear an argument for being just, justice for its own sake, rather than sort of these external benefits that you get. And so Socrates starts into this very long discussion about the nature of the city. So this is Socrates is pretty good at taking a circuitous route to finding the truth, or toward making his argument. And the way he's doing this is he says, all right, well, we have these two versions of justice. There's the individual justice and the city justice. And that was something that Thrasymachus had brought up before. And he says, well, let's just start, just as maybe we can see larger letters than smaller letters at a distance, let's look at the city and figure out where justice and injustice come from. And so he starts describing this city, the origin of a city, just saying, well, it starts with, 4 or 5 guys, just a few bros getting together, trying to shepherd some sheep. And he slowly grows this hypothetical city, saying, well, you're going to need food, you're going to need clothes, you're going to need trade, you're going to need a marketplace, you're going to need a doctor, you're going to need sailors, you're going to need merchants, you're going to need retailers. And then eventually people are going to want luxuries, and then luxuries are going to lead to war, is what he's saying, which I think is a fascinating concept, that it's not just the barren, you're not just fighting over like the water well necessarily. Sometimes it's to get something you don't actually need. But people become addicted to their luxuries, so they're willing to support war, for like, say, oil or other natural resources that are not strictly necessary to human subsistence. So that's where I'm going to leave it, is that we finally kept building this city up, and it just can't be contained, and it has to go to war with other cities. And it gets traced back to luxury, which I think is just a very fascinating idea, and also doesn't give you a whole lot of like hope for humanity if we're just going to war so we can have nice things and pastries and prostitutes and whatever else was in that litany. So I'm going to leave the discussion here and get back to Socrates later. My overall view is, so far, these guys have presented a pretty devastating argument against justice. So sort of this combined character of Thrasymachus, Glaucon, and Adeimantus. So I'm going to be very curious at whether Socrates is able to refute this. And more importantly, it's just, these guys are making points that people do not spend nearly enough time thinking about. Like, what's the true nature of a person? Is the version that we see of them in the media, on social media, in our heads, does that have anything at all to do with who they really are? Or are we just pretending that everything is as it seems? So it seems to be a recurring theme here, and I know it's going to recur once again in the great allegory of the cave. So if you're enjoying your time here in the cave with me, hit the old thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell next to the subscribe button, get those notifications when I tackle part 2 of book 2 of Plato's Republic. See you tomorrow.